Well, hello everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Faculty Spotlight. We are highlighting some of the best faculty at the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And today we have with us Fei Du, who is an award-winning professor of accountancy. Fei Du earned her PhD at the University of Southern California, her bachelor's degree in Beijing at the Beijing Technology and Business University, taught at the University of Hong Kong before joining Gies 8 years ago. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our talk here.
Me too. So, were you destined to become an academic, or are you an accidental academic?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I'm destined to be an academic.
How
So
so?
I will share with you some story when I was just starting my first year graduate program when I was in Beijing. So I was an undergraduate accounting, and the year when I graduated, it was really the year when the Big Four in China begin to boom. And the
Hmm.
IPO market in China is growing. Like there is a lot of economic prospect, making the accountancy kind of like really easy to find great jobs. My supervisor, kind of like my mentor of my undergraduate thesis, he asked me a question. He asked me a question about philosophy question of a triangle in your life. Okay, so there are three possibilities that you could possibly have in your life. One is freedom. One is power. The other one is money. So you can hold the other things constant and you can improve the one point as much as you can, right? So let's say that you could choose to have a certain level of power and money and have as much freedom as you can. Or you can choose to have a certain level of freedom and power, but have as much money as you can. Different people would make different choices, I would
True.
assume. Uh,
True.
it's an interview for me, so I'm not going to ask what you would choose. But for me, I knew in my heart that I was going to choose the more freedom that I have in my mind, the clarity of thinking, knowing how the world is working, how human decisions are reflected in what we see in these organizations, entrepreneurial decisions, equity market. Like the intellectual freedom is some treasure to me that I would be thrilled and privileged to have. I'm just so lucky and fortunate that I chose the career path I chose.
And of all the fields to choose in academia, you chose accounting. Why? Why accounting? Was it the boom that you saw in China with the Big Four, or what was it something else?
For accountancy, that's a happy accident. So that's a interesting part about the Chinese culture as well. I heard about this. I don't know whether it's true, but it seems that like accounting and finance is considered kind of like accounting and finance are in China, especially accounting. Okay, I can talk about that culture with more confidence. Is people kind of think accountancy and taking good care of the fiduciary duties and making sure that wealth preserve and grow across generations is a nice job that a girl could have. So there are, kind of majors people think girls should have in my age that I grow up. I'm not saying this apply to anything into today's world. I even hesitate to say this. But there are several of them, like being a good teacher, being a good accountant, being a good doctor. Those are considered great jobs for, and my parents basically chose accounting for me. So,
Ah, okay. There's the secret. Well, it's the language of business. It's a highly respectable field, and it does bring discipline and accountability to
yeah,
capitalism in a way. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, right?
Now that I look back, I feel like I immediately clicked with accountancy as soon as I started taking these financial accounting auditing classes. It's the language, it's the code, it's the standard data that exists in the firm that as soon as you begin to understand human behavior, human decision, every human decision leaves a trace in the accounting systems. Understanding what's going on there almost feels like playing detective, which
Ah,
is how I try to teach my classes as well.
Because you do specialize in data analytics
Yes,
in
exactly.
your accountancy courses, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's the highly analytical nature to trying to get insights from data as a result.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I
Getting
know in my
insight.
early days as a business journalist,
Mhm.
you studied income statements and balance sheets,
Yeah.
and just by looking at the numbers, you knew what the story was going to be immediately. You can be
Mhm.
contrarian about it and think, okay, there was a turnaround in works or not, but the numbers really do tell a story, indeed.
Exactly. It does tell a story indeed. So something I could share about like what would be my favorite teaching style is in a typical case study session, right? So for example, I would always start with asking students questions about what happens in the US equity market.
Mm.
So for example, let's say Pfizer and BioNTech. These two companies, they work together to push the COVID vaccine so that they become available to the US household. However, when this break news of that these two companies are going to have a breakthrough in terms of the vaccine technology to the market, the stock market reaction to these two companies are fundamentally different. For you, you probably already know why exactly is that. But for students, if this is the first time they're seeing this story, they will probably assume for both Pfizer and BioNTech, this is a huge boost to their stock price once this news happens to the market. It's not the case. Giving them a bit more accounting understanding, especially like you said, their balance sheet, their income statement would help them with understand what's going on exactly of the decisions, the business models, and how all of these decisions can then ultimately translate to a capital market reaction.
Which company had the more favorable stock market reaction? Was it Pfizer?
It's BioNTech.
Yes, and the
Be-
reason is because it was a single product company, a startup, so the underlying dynamics of the company were lower than Pfizer because
Yeah,
Pfizer has a brand and a wealth of other products that it relies upon. So there was much more leverage in that new invention
yeah,
from startup than there
yeah.
would be in Pfizer because of the massive portfolio of drugs they already have, right?
Exactly, exactly. So it goes to echo a very deep kind of theory in economics, which is big firms don't innovate, small firms
Yes,
innovate. Why is
indeed.
that? Big companies have money, they have resources, they have talent. Why don't they renovate? Why don't they innovate? Why don't they create? So that can lead to some interesting discussions. But what you said is exactly right.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm. Mm.
So what was your dissertation on? I'm curious.
Oh, my dissertation is actually on the bond market in China.
Hmm.
Mm. So I looked at the political connections, the political ties of all those companies who are issuing bond to the capital market to see how the political ties, these social capital, would help these company in the bond market in getting access to the market in the first place, and also in negotiating some more kind of like beneficial deals when they are issuing their bond.
What did you discover?
We discover that the political ties matter for these companies to get access to preferential capital, but it's not exactly entirely good news, especially for the bondholders when it's especially long-term bond. Because in the long run, your political ties may change. Once the regime change, you're now being the friends to the wrong people. So sometimes when people cannot really put that type of long horizon into really thinking about what exactly do relational capital means, social capital and social ties mean, for companies, it's interesting trajectory to unfold when there is a sudden change in the ruling regime. I wouldn't say ruling regime, but
Yeah. Although I would think in China, obviously the ruling regime is much more stable than it would be in a country like the US, where every 4 years, every 8 years for sure, there's often a dramatic change.
if my mom hadn't chose accountancy for me, I would definitely choose political economy. I love reading all these books about politics, economics, geography, and how they intertwine together to affect the fundamental first order effect. We sometimes jokes about accountancy is not the first order effect,
Right.
but politics is.
So, in all of the research that you've done, I wonder what you would consider to be your most significant or meaningful finding from your work. Would it relate to your dissertation or something else?
In general, I do research related to design of the organizational management accounting system, like performance evaluation, like promotion, the compensation system. So one of the recent working projects, which I feel I really like the finding from that research work, is that in the society, people always have their eyes on the winners of the tournament. That is the winners of the promotion. Who should be promoted? How should you design a system so that you select the best, so that people can shine when you give them this nice promotion? However, most people don't get promoted. What if you get passed over by someone um, given all these different circumstances, what happened to those people, middle managers, who get passed over when they're trying to move up this corporate ladder? And what are some unintended consequences there? What would happen to your high quality performers?
Hmm.
Would they leave? What would the company do to sustain their motivation even after they get passed over? Meaning that is big, kind of like improvement in terms of the lifetime salary, kind of this drop in this promotion likelihood. So I like this paper because I I feel a lot of research has been on the winners of the promotions. And we want to look at not the losers from the promotion, but once in a while, we do get passed over in the promotion. And what happens there?
Yeah, what does happen to these people?
We find that overboard, people don't like it, right? People don't like being passed over for promotion. But then the high quality ones, their dislike is of greater magnitude. So if you're thinking about the unintended consequences of this promotion system, you can say that promotion system serves as a nice sorting, that you're trying to put those people who are good at what they do, especially with the next leadership position, and selecting those people into those roles. However, given that the positions are limited and there is necessarily a hierarchy, you necessarily would then put employees a comparative comparison and tournament with each other. Once this turns into a tournament, the motivation effect suddenly becomes much, much more significant compared to the sorting mechanism. So
Hmm.
what we find is that higher quality candidates, meaning that those have a higher XNT, expected likelihood to get promoted in the first place, they experience greater drop in their performance. If you do nothing about it, they are more likely to leave within 3 years.
Right.
We also look at some of the mechanisms that are likely to mitigate their motivation loss. How you can give them some bonuses, right? How you can individualize the bonus and the compensation system, and also design the promotion system to be more predictable or more transparent would help with sustain the motivation loss of those people who get lost.
In a way, that's counterintuitive because I would have thought that the most promising people who are passed over would get over their disappointment and would re-energize them and they would recommit to the job in a way that would make them promotable the next time around.
Mhm.
But guess
Yeah, right. So should we look at the next period's performance, and should our eyes always be focused on forward looking, right? And
right.
if you still think that there is always an opportunity there to sustain people's motivation, companies' reaction would be, we don't need to do anything about these people who are passed over. They should be thinking about the next big promotion that are there. Yeah, yeah. So thanks for, yeah, immediately get the tension part of what we're trying
Sure.
to do. Yeah.
And so many people are passed over, and younger people today have sometimes much more difficulty in dealing with being passed over, don't you think?
That's a great point. Our research definitely does not spoke to this
Your
generation.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah. So the youngest managers in our data set are like 35 years old.
Mhm.
And in our data, we see that when younger people get passed over, they handle it better because
Uh,
their horizon would determine that they are more likely to still focus on the next promotion.
Oh,
Mm.
makes sense, actually. They have a longer time frame. They're still young in the job.
Right. Yeah. And so their kind of like Bayesian update of they're lowering the estimation of their promotion likelihood is smaller compared to someone who is closer to retirement age.
Now, Faye, what's surprising to me is that topic almost feels like an OB topic, not an accounting topic. Right? I mean, how you motivate people, the human dynamics of who gets promoted and who doesn't. It almost sounds like an organizational behavior problem or challenge as opposed to an accountancy challenge. So how in the world did you get on top of that one?
Mm, I get that question a lot. So it's hard. So let's say that promotion or like performance evaluation or organizational culture or recruitment, a lot of different fields have our own grab on it because those are things that truly matters to the organization. If you're interested in internal organizational design, right, to what extent you delegate, are you going to franchise or are you going to own this door? Are you going to evaluate these people based on those KPIs? Psychologists work on these questions, economists working on these questions, accounting professors also work on these questions. I would say in our world, in the domain and the field of the management accounting, um, our analysis kind of, I wouldn't say exactly differs from OB because by the end of the day, I feel it's the topic that matters, not exactly whether on my door of the office it says accountancy associate professor Feidu, that matters that much. But our philosophy comes more from looking at the promotion system and the performance evaluation system, especially together with the compensation design.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's our accounting kind of grabbing point. Yeah. Mm,
sure.
mm.
That's understandable. So, in your classroom, I wonder if there is a misconception of one kind or another that students may bring with them about the field of accounting and accountancy, and how you basically address it in your teaching and help to see them see this differently.
Mm.
Is
I
there a
love
common
that question.
misperception that
I
people
love
come
that
into
question.
thinking about accounting? I mean, some people might think, okay, accounting is boring, for example,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm.
Uh, when I don't think it is boring. I think it's incredibly revealing in a way. It's almost like detective work to some degree.
Exactly, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
but what would be a common misperception that people have who come into your classroom
Their
about?
misperception about accounting is that accounting is very technical
That's
in
true.
the sense that you're trying to get the balance sheet to work. You're trying to make the numbers right. And then, so I feel like my students' misperception with accountancy is how to get the numbers right. Uh, and another misconception is once they get number right, they are okay with it. They no longer try to understand what these numbers mean,
Ah,
right? So once you get the number right, that's the starting point because then you begin to understand, oh, why Costco is having such a high asset turnover. What's your secret? Why Amazon can increase their margin to this high level because of their cloud business, right? Why Ferrari as a luxury car can have such a low marketing expenditure. So the explanation part after you get these numbers right is the more important part for accountancy.
right,
So that's another part I feel like for most of the successful colleagues, like my mentors, my colleagues, I learned so much from them, is that most of the time, if you look at these great accounting professors, they wouldn't make students struggle with the entire class about getting the numbers right and then spend 5 minutes at the end of the class talking about what these numbers mean. They would have their own magical way to try to quickly walk through the students so that they see the aha moment of how to get the numbers right. And then they would spend the 80% of the class time talking about what these numbers mean about the entrepreneurs making decisions behind them. Mm.
right,
And how, by some Charlie Monk would say, any formula that you learn from graduate school does not really matter in real life. But for accountancy, I think for accountancy and tax, I guess he would think learning these formula would still be the fundamental kind of like language that we use in accountancy. So in that sense, I feel the misconception that my students come into the classroom is thinking getting numbers correct is so hard. So we need to help them handle that fear and help them get to the correct number really quickly. Then the second step, they're like, now I get the numbers correct. It's someone else's job. It's no longer my job. But if you want
Uh,
to become a CFO, if you want to become a partner, if you want to become a true advisor that you know what's going on, where value is created, where value is destroyed, you need to understand. You put the numbers in the context, benchmarking it, classifying it, categorizing it. Make sure that you put it in the right drawer, in the right market, in the right context to understand what's really going on. And by the end of the day, then you can form a nice understanding of how do I really interpret numbers to put them in context. And then you can begin to say, now I draw from data to insights.
and that's really the difference between a number cruncher and a decision maker.
That's a really nice punchline.
Now, I wonder if there's been a recent book or a piece of research that you've read that has influenced your thinking of late.
A lot. Yeah. Okay. That's a difficult one. I mean, um, but one thing that I thought is really cool and it got me thinking all the time is the humanities last exam. So there is AI website that's called AGI.ai. Its name is Humanities Last Exam. So what it does is that it attracts, I don't know, tens of thousands of domain experts to answer the most difficult questions in their domain on this humanities last exam. And then they would compare this with how AI would generate the answer.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
the interesting part is that once you put these questions into a language description, into a text box, seems that AI can do a lot of the work
Yes.
and it shines in the performance. But it makes me wonder to what extent in the real world, the problems we need to handle and we need to solve as a junior analyst or as a CFO or as an engagement partner, to what extent the question you face is there described in the text box, right? What you're facing is different people talking to you. Every person have their different interest. By the end of the day, the decision maker needs to think about all these dials and how they work together. And I just feel a lot of times these are not the real questions that AI could easily solve. Or humanity, it's hard for us to directly give our decision making to AI in that sense.
Mm.
Mm.
Now, how do you find yourself using AI yourself now?
I use it. I use it in teaching. I use it in my research. I use it sometimes just to talking for fun
Hmm.
in all the senses, right? For example, you were talking about for accountancy, the junior worker would be the number cruncher.
Right.
Advanced would be decision maker.
Yes.
And when we teach data analytics, we say that junior would be worker B,
Hmm.
working on code. Senior one would be tastemaker, that you know what is a nice code, what is going to generate something that's useful for your client.
Right.
So a lot of times I feel that I'm trying to use AI to save my students from some very basic legwork of working as a worker bee or working as a number cruncher. And then once they can work together with a powerful AI agent to get the numbers right, let's now move to the decision-making domain and see what exactly is happening behind the curtain. Let's try to review the decision-making process, right? So in the class, it's like 100 minutes time. If you spend 90 minutes getting the numbers right, or getting the code right, or teaching people about coding, that's still very important, right? And I have colleagues that focus on teaching about these very fundamental data skills, data literacy or coding literacy. But but I also feel in my class because I focus on data storytelling, so I can make the getting to the fun part really quickly.
Right.
So,
Let AI do the kind of grinding work
mhm.
to get you to the destination, and then from there you can really work with the solutions and the interpretation of the data.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you an example. So, for example, in my class, I also teach some fundamental kind of statistical skills, just as basic as correlation,
Hmm.
right? So, let's say that if you think about in the past 50 years, the G7 countries and look at their GDP real growth and look at a correlation matrix across all of these G7 countries, how would their correlation look like?
Mm.
Now, the answer in short there is if you look at correlation um, coefficient among the G7 countries, within this G7 is much higher than if you look at the G7 countries' economic growth correlation with another country, say China or India or Brazil.
Right.
That's because they are more synchronized, right? So the G7 countries, they have a lot of trade. Their fiscal policy is more likely to be in a coordinated way. Anyways, and then at the end, I would also throw in some very interesting countries like Bangladesh or some other countries that even kind of like receive travel visa ban from the United States, right? Then you would see that the economic growth correlation there would become much lower or even insignificant. Okay.
Ah.
So what I'm trying to say is that before the AI's world, getting such data, getting the code ready, writing a correlation matrix to generate all these information across different countries, across different time periods, choosing different samples, using different measures, that itself can take a long time for students to figure out how to work. Now I can get the preparation part done within 5 minutes. I can show to people, here's a dynamic control. You can move your mouse, you can slide it into 79 to 2025. You can choose G7 countries. You can choose the per capita GDP growth. You can look at your correlation. Now, what is our interpretation from them?
Right.
Right. Very similar, you can move that to stock market.
Yep.
Does Apple has a higher correlation with
Mm.
Tesla or or with the rest of the market? So a lot of the interesting data tricks that you can immediately pull out becomes so much more available to students and for them to look at, explore, experiment with, even create their own interesting data analytics. It's very liberating, the power of
Mm.
AI. Yeah.
So now, what's one real world implication of your research that you wish more business leaders understood?
John, look at that question that you ask. I think it's a great question, but also at the same time, I feel humbled and I don't know whether it's my place to answer that question. Like after so many years of doing accounting research, and talking with these brilliant minds who are the CFOs, who are the partners, who are the entrepreneurs, who are leading kind of like creative labs, who are leading creative technology, they know so much more than what I do. So, what's one real world implication of my research that I wish more business leaders understood? It's a much beyond me level question. I feel like Nobel Prize winner probably can say that. But one kind of like research finding that I want to share with the business world is that I feel like a lot of times we value the contracting in economics as very high level. We think that as long as we have good contracting, we can solve a lot of things, right? Because you can write a complete contract, then you can determine the obligation of one party versus the other party. And then it seems that problem is solved. Now,
Mm.
however, when you're thinking about the internal design of the firm's management control system, the recruiting, the performance evaluation, the promotion, selecting the right type of people and then give them the contract would work much easier than just saying, I give every agent, every person, every labor I can simply find, give them entirely the same type of contract, and contract is going to take care of the things. Not
Right.
necessarily. You need to select the right type of people who shares your values, who are aligned with your goal, who are more predispositioned to accept this kind of contracting. So that's going to lower a lot of the transaction costs that we observe in business.
True.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are many lawyers who feed off contracts that are violated suggests how many contracts fail on one level or another, probably. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
test your humble personality and ask you to be the dean of the day and finish this sentence. The business
Mm.
school of the future would have much more of blank. What would blank be in your mind for the business school of the future?
I wish the business school of the future would have much more heterogeneous class size.
Ah,
So I don't mind some classes having 3,000 people. I
ooh,
also hope that some classes we can just have 12 people.
right.
That's my wish.
Yeah,
It's
because
hard to design, it's really hard to design an organization
that's true.
that we are used to. Each class we have 30 students. We have one professor, 1 to 2 TAs. We regulate this as one semester, 16 weeks. Everyone is doing exactly the same thing. It's like a marching army, everyone is marching forward with the same pace. Thanks for saying that. I again, I'm not the dean. I'm not going to be a dean. I wish the business schools could be a bit more individualized, that we
Yeah.
have heterogeneous class size. We can even have heterogeneous kind of a class schedule, so that some students may be willing to work on their projects at the beginning of the semester and then learn that they really don't know how to do accounting. And then the rest of the semester, they can learn based on a attitude that I already know that I don't know how to work on this final project. So I guess different class size and then different schedules, such as individual kind of tailored environment where I could more freely discuss with my students. Another wish, right? So for example, some students see me and they want to see me again the next semester. I take that as a huge compliment.
Yes.
But based on my contract, I teach one semester during one, and don't tell this to my dean, right? Because I'm not trying to ask that I want to teach all semesters. But somehow, I don't know whether the future of business school is gonna be more flexible, agile, in the sense that um, there could be some large classes that happen on a 6 week schedule. There can also be kind of like 12 people just work with me for 1 to 2 years, even as an undergraduate.
Yes. It sounds like you would love a seminar course with a handful of students that you would have very big impact on and have real relationships with.
Mm.
Yes.
Impact, I don't know. Real relation, I think that, yeah, that's something you would achieve if you work with these
Yes.
12 people. Even if I don't have meaningful relationship among themselves, they will develop some meaningful relationship.
True enough.
Mm, mm.
Well, Faye, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I very much enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you,
Good luck.
John. Same
Good
here.
luck to you.
Thank you.
So, and for all of you out there, I hope you enjoyed it as well. We've been speaking with Faye Du, a professor of accountancy at the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. You should know that Gies has a world-class accountancy department, highly ranked everywhere. And Faye Du is one of many incredible professors in accounting at the Gies School. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.